Thank you so much for making the time to be with us today. We know there are a lot of competing events at the Capitol today that you could be at, so we thank you for making time to be with us. I'm Rebecca Warren. I'm State Senator for the 18th District, which is the bulk of the population of Washtenaw County. And it's my pleasure to be joined today by so many colleagues from the House and Senate Democratic caucuses, with some of our guest speakers who you will meet soon, and members of the business community, to show our support today for updating Michigan's Elliott-Larsen Civil Rights Act to include sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. We know that this work has been in the pipeline for a while, and we feel that this timing is very important with yesterday's Supreme Court consideration of the marriage issue, with yesterday in the Senate our colleagues taking up a bill that we honestly feel like does the opposite of what we're trying to do, tries to institutionalize discrimination as opposed to sending the message that Michigan's arms, our businesses, our schools, our places of public accommodation are open to all people. So we expect to hear from wonderful people here today, and we have bill sponsors who will talk. But first, I would like to turn it over to my colleague, Representative John Hoadley.
Thank you, Senator Warren. So I'm Representative John Hoadley, serving the people of the 60th District in Kalamazoo, and I'm really excited to be the sponsor of the House version of expanding the Elliott-Larsen Civil Rights Act to include sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression. This is common sense legislation that's long overdue. It's been called for by Governor Snyder in his State of the State address. And it's really time that we brought Michigan in line with where everyone else of the citizens of our state are. So tonight, this afternoon, this isn't a conversation about the bill sponsors. It's really about the stories of the people impacted. And so we're going to be hearing from a few of them. And after hearing, I invite everybody in our state to join us in becoming citizen co-sponsors of this legislation by visiting myequalitynow.com and adding your name to support the legislators that are introducing this, the stories of people impacted, and to make sure that this is legislation that's called for by people across the state. So first I want to bring forward 3 stories of people impacted by the legislation. We're going to be hearing from Bree Campbell. She's a trans woman who's impacted by discrimination at work. Then we'll hear from Roz Keith, who is the mother of Hunter, a transgender son, and Lisa Goyette, who also has a transgender son. And they'll be available for questions at the close of the press conference. So Bree, can you come on forward?
Hi, my name is Bree Campbell, and I'm from Detroit, Michigan. I have been in transition now for the last 5 years, and I was discriminated against in 2 instances, once for housing and once for using the female's bathroom at a job that I have. So the first one was me being discriminated against for housing. I went to an apartment building, filled out an application, had a wonderful conversation with the leasing manager there about moving in and how that was going to look. Turned in my application, and maybe an hour and a half later I got a phone call stating that they couldn't process my application because my name didn't match my gender. So I explained to the woman on the phone that I was transgender, and for all intents and purposes, when referring to me, please refer to me as the name that I've chosen. This was before I legally had my name changed, and it seemed like everything was fine. I was told that the application would take at least 3 days to process. The next morning around 10 a.m. I got a phone call stating that my application was denied. And when I tried to ask why, I was basically given the runaround. I tried to contact management. That was unsuccessful, and all I wanted was a reason. And I didn't feel like that I got that. So being an advocate in Detroit, I had a lot of resources, and Equality Michigan actually took on my case along with the City of Detroit Law Department. It took 1.5 years to realize that I wasn't protected. All these people went through all of this work to try to make sure that I was protected, and found out that Michigan had no protection for gender identity or expression on the books. So basically 1.5 years of waiting ended up with me still not having any answers. Later on that year, I got my name changed and went to my HR department at an employer that I work for and went to change my name and was told that that could not happen. One, the lady seemed to have a really hard time with changing my name because my first name had changed, not my last name, and she made a comment basically saying like, oh, well, you know, did you get married? And I was like, no, I'm changing my first name. And she gave me the runaround about changing my name and changing my email address to match, you know, my new name that I had recently gotten. And it's really hard to talk about because a lot of times I don't think people understand how deep a lot of these laws affect people like me. So went through the process of trying to have my name changed and finally got all of that stuff squared away. And a week later, I was pulled into the office by my supervisor, explaining to me that there was a memo sent out saying that if I was caught in a female's bathroom at the employer that I was working for, that I would be terminated. At that point, I really didn't know what to do. I was really crushed. My job at that time was the only source of employment that I had, and I was afraid of losing my job. So instead of making a big ruckus about it, especially considering that my last discrimination case didn't go as far as I expected it to, I just kind of let it happen. I really want people to understand that these laws that are being proposed to be put on the books really harm people like me, especially people who are just trying to do the right thing and live and make sure that we have employment and housing. So I really hope that everyone watching this video will understand a little bit more about the issues that trans people face and support legislation to protect gender identity and expression. Thank you for your time.
Good morning. I'm here today because I'm the parent of a transgender teen. A little over 2 years ago, at the age of 14, my son, who is braver than I ever could have imagined, came out to me. Assigned female at birth, Hunter was the quintessential tomboy. He preferred denim over lace, Disney heroes versus heroines, tree climbing rather than nail painting. His avatars were always male, his costumes never feminine, flowery, or frilly. When my son began asking to shop in the boys' department, our outings often ended in tears. When he showed me pictures of the haircut he wanted, I was puzzled. When he began to carry himself different and walk with a swagger rather than a sway, I noticed, and I wondered. So when he confessed to me with 100% certainty that he was transgender, I wasn't shocked. I was, however, concerned. I was concerned for his future. I was concerned for his health, emotionally, physically, mentally. As a parent, my main goal was to help Hunter achieve this holistic health bullseye. And if I could do this, then I was confident he would find happiness. So while I put my calm exterior into high gear, my insides were doing nauseating emotional gymnastics. What would Hunter's future look like? Would he find love? Would he fit in? Would he ultimately find happiness? Did you know that trans kids who are not supported are more likely to commit suicide, end up on the streets, or engage in risky, dangerous behavior? Recently, we lost 3 transgender teens to suicide in 1 week, and these are just the ones that made the news. We have been very open about our journey. The decision was made as a family that education is the key to creating awareness and acceptance. If we could save a life by telling our story, we will have succeeded. As cliche as it sounds, it does take a village. Transgender individuals need to know that they can live authentically without living in fear. They need to know that they can apply for a job and not have to hide who they are. They need to have access to appropriate medical care, without worry that they will face discrimination because their identity and their bodies don't align. My son is entitled to a world that offers him the same opportunities afforded to his peers. Hunter knows that we have his back every day. We as a community need to have our children's backs. Let's make sure that transgender individuals have the same support, safeguards, laws, and protections in place that every other citizen in this state has and has access to. Thank you.
Good morning. I, like Roz, am a parent of a transgender son. My name is Lisa Goyette, so I'm here to speak to you today as a mother. My husband and I love our son very much. It's a privilege to be able to parent him, and it's a privilege that I don't take for granted because I know that not everyone is given that privilege that wants it and deserves it. We adopted our son from China, and we want nothing more for him to be happy and healthy, and I think that's what most parents want of their kids. We also know that it's our job to look out for his well-being. We try to teach him things like be kind, work hard, do things to help people that need it, and mostly don't be afraid to speak up when you see a social injustice occurring. A few years ago, our son started going through a very difficult time emotionally. And as a mom, you know when your child is hurting, and it was terrifying for me and my husband. So we started looking for help, and we kept turning over rocks until we found the right help. And we found the people that told us what our son's truth is. And our son's truth is that he is a transgender individual. We still love our son, we accept him, and we are just thankful that at least now we have an answer and we can move forward. So this put us on the path of healing. And through this path of healing, we've gotten into a support group where we've met numerous other families that look just like ours, that have these amazing kids like Hunter, and that have these amazing parents like Roz that love their kids unconditionally. And I wish every child had that. Our kids deserve what every other child deserves, and that's to be given an education that's good, to be in a school that is safe, to be treated with equality, and to know that they're not going to be discriminated against just because they're transgender. Gender dysphoria, which is the clinical term, simply means that the gender that you're born with at birth is contrary to how you feel about yourself. It's not a mental illness. It has nothing to do with sexual orientation. And I can tell you it is not a choice, and it's not a choice that anyone would ever willingly want. This is a tough road. So a transgender person has done nothing wrong, nor has their parents. Transgender individuals in this state have no protection, and that's wrong. The Elliott-Larsen Act is supposed to prohibit discriminatory practices for everyone, but it doesn't cover transgender individuals or people with sexual orientation or gender identity things. Why were they left out? This is clearly a blatant admission to exclude a population of our society that is already marginalized, and that is a violation of their civil rights. And that is an example of a social injustice that I was talking about that we have to speak up on. My U.S. citizen son is taught that all men are created equal. And that's from Thomas Jefferson, who's one of the founding fathers of our country. And when he said that, he didn't have any caveats. Discrimination of any kind is wrong. It's hurtful, it's harmful, and it serves no place in our society, especially a society that claims to offer life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that's from our Declaration of Independence. Those three examples of rights are given to all human beings, and our government is supposed to protect all human beings. My son, like other transgender individuals, must be afforded the same opportunity and protection that everyone else is given, because we are all equal. No one person is more or less deserving than this treatment. I want to know that as I help my son become a productive member of society and I teach him how to abide by the law, that I'm not going to have to be fearful that when he enters the workplace that he could be fired for a job, or that I have to worry about his safety when he goes out just to live his day-to-day life, or that he could be denied services simply because he's transgender. So this Elliott-Larsen Act that we're here today to talk about, it must be amended to include these individuals that need this protection. And now I want to tell you a little bit about my son, and I wish he was here today, but he's sick at home. He is a great kid. I am so proud of him, and he is one of the bravest individuals that I know. He has taught me more about accepting and just not judging people and looking at them and saying, you know what, they are okay just as they are. He is a great person. He has great potential to do some wonderful things in his life. So my continued job as a parent is to ensure that that potential is met and that he can give back to society. The job of the lawmakers here in Michigan is to ensure that my son is given the same liberties that these lawmakers are given and their children are given. So I want, if this bill does not get amended, I want someone to tell me why my son or other children like my son are not deserving of this protection. I'd like to hear why. It was truly a grave error in 1976 when Elliott-Larsen left out this community that we're talking about today. But mistakes, as we know, can always be corrected. So today is the day that I hope that mistake gets on the path to be corrected. Thank you very much for your time.
Bree and Roz and Lisa, thank you so much for your courage to be with us, to tell your stories. And I hope you feel supported. I hope you see behind you the sea of members of the House and Senate. And I'd like to point out in particular that we've been joined by the leaders of both of our caucus. Both Leader Greimel from the House, Leader Ananick from the Senate are here. That really shows, I think, the depth and breadth of support that you have for this policy, and we are going to work hard to make sure that it passes for you, for your families, and all the families of Michigan. You have our word on that today. The next group of speakers that I'd like to call up are going to help us understand what's happening in the business community and in the local government community. We're going to start by asking Andy Labar from the Ann Arbor Ypsilanti Regional Chamber of Commerce, and then Mayor Nathan Triplett from the City of East Lansing.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you to you and Representative Hoadley for introducing this legislation. It's hard for anyone to follow stories and testimony and experiences that touch on the personal and the social and the real-life implications of what we're talking about here today. The best I can do is talk about the business implications. The Ann Arbor Ypsilanti Regional Chamber has roughly 1,200 members, primarily in Washtenaw County. Those are members that get this issue. They get that we don't succeed when we have a sign up that says, "Welcome to Michigan," most of you. What we need is a sign up that says, "Welcome to Michigan, all of you." Our employers get this. If you look at it, 90% of them already have the right things in place on their own. Now, we're not here in a chamber capacity to tell the Michigan legislature how to do its job, but perhaps provide a helpful suggestion that updating and modernizing Elliott-Larsen to include these protections is the right thing to do, not just from a civil perspective, but from the perspective of if we are a state in open, albeit friendly, but open competition with those around us to attract and retain talent, you are taking a tool off the table. You are robbing our businesses of that tool to get those folks to come here and grow here. Come and grow professionally, obviously. That has corollary benefits in terms of the state as a whole. And it has great economic benefits for folks who have no interest in this issue or many others. We want talent here in Michigan. Updating Elliott-Larsen gives us a tool to access that talent. It allows us to get back on a level playing field. And so when folks ask, well, what's the business interest or component of this issue? Isn't this a social or a civil issue? No. It's an issue about giving businesses the tools they need to succeed. I can't emphasize that point enough. If you look at our chamber's membership, again, they get it. But as long as they are located in the state of Michigan, and as long as state law does not understand that fundamental fact, we are at a disadvantage. Take that disadvantage away from our businesses. Allow us to bring in the best talent, allow us to keep the best talent, and let them grow both personally and professionally. So I won't take up any more time, but I will say simply, on behalf of the Ann Arbor Ypsilanti Regional Chamber and our members and the business community we represent, thank you for taking this step. Thank you for taking this initial move towards doing not just the right thing, but the thing that will help us all succeed and profit. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Nathan Triplett. I'm the mayor of the city of East Lansing and the vice president of the Michigan Municipal League. You know, we're here this morning talking about the reintroduction of state legislation to ban discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. So you could rightly be asking yourself, what's the local guy doing here? And I hope that the answer to that question is speaking on behalf of those who have set an example that I hope that the legislature will follow. You've already heard this morning that it's perfectly legal in Michigan to fire someone for being gay or to deny them housing for being transgender. And that's true in most of Michigan. But the exception to that rule is in the 38 Michigan municipalities that have already passed local comprehensive non-discrimination ordinances, which are on the board here behind us. My community, the city of East Lansing, was the first, not just in Michigan, but in the United States, to pass an ordinance banning discrimination based on sexual orientation in March of 1972. So to save you the trouble of doing the math, that's 43 years ago. 43 years ago, we took the step that we're asking the state to take today. And that timing is important because there is going to be those who argue that the proposal in this legislation is somehow radical or untested. But in fact, local units of government have been successfully implementing this type of non-discrimination policy and the protections that it provides to the great benefit of our communities for nearly half a century at this point in time. It's time to extend those protections to all Michiganders, and all the state legislature has to do is follow the example set by local units of government. So in the absence of state action, local officials have stepped up to lead, and the important question I think for all of us here today is why? Why take that step? Why have these 38 communities done this? No one in this room needs to be told, and we've heard about it already today, that we are in a pitched battle for talent attraction and retention today. The governor talks about it, legislators talk about it, local officials like myself talk about it, and the Michigan business community clearly talks about it, as we heard from Andy. But local units of government have already been in the vanguard of that battle, and we've been doing everything in our power to make Michigan a place where talented people want to live, work, raise a family, and start their business. Ensuring that communities are welcoming to all by adopting these local non-discrimination ordinances, among other things, has been critical to that process. We can't successfully attract and retain talent to a place where people feel unwelcome or unsafe, as we've already heard today. So refusing to protect LGBT Michiganders from discrimination is like putting a giant flashing sign up on the Michigan border that says, "Closed for business." That's what we're doing today. In fact, this issue is so important to our communities and to our state's future that the Michigan Municipal League, the statewide association representing local units of government, cities, and villages, has identified embracing diversity and inclusion as one of our key legislative priorities. The MML supports amending the Elliott-Larsen Civil Rights Act to ban discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. And if you'll indulge me just momentarily, I think it's useful if you'd let me read from our legislative priorities the brief paragraph that describes exactly why that is. Creating and sustaining a genuine commitment to inclusion and diversity is essential to attracting and retaining an educated, talented workforce. 21st century communities embrace and celebrate people of all backgrounds and recognize that diversity is an unparalleled source of strength and an invaluable competitive advantage in a global economy. Policy at all levels must foster inclusion of all people in the civic life of our communities, regardless of their race, color, religion, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, or national origin. To build a prosperous state and vibrant cities, Michigan must be welcoming to all who wish to make its communities their home and place of business. So I would submit to you today that Michigan cities are doing our part. We're leading on this issue and have been for decades. Now it's time for the legislature to follow suit. We can't afford further inaction, and so I commend the legislators that are standing behind me here today, and I'm proud to stand with them as they lead on this issue and support their efforts moving forward so that we can finally pass this long overdue legislation in the state of Michigan. Thank you all.
I think you heard from our guest speakers some pretty compelling reasons why it's time that Michigan join the 18 other states and the District of Columbia who have already passed these protections, that our 38 cities join with cities totaling 200 across the United States that have taken this action at the local level, because often our local governments are laboratories for the state become laboratories for the federal government. It's time for us to lead. And it means so much that you're here with us today. It means so much to hear the personal stories. So again, thank you, Bree, Roz, Lisa, Nathan, Andy, for coming up and joining us. And thank you to all of you who take the time to do what Representative Hoadley said and become citizen co-sponsors of this legislation. Visit the website, miequalitynow.com, and add your name to the list of people who are saying it's time for the Elliott-Larsen Civil Rights Act to protect all Michiganders, not just some Michiganders.